He already knew how it would end. He knew the stone would move. He knew the man inside would walk out. He knew that in a few minutes every person standing there would go from weeping to shouting. And standing in front of that grave with the answer already in his hands, Jesus cried. Not a tear he wiped away quickly. The wording in the New World Translation is unusually tender. It does not simply say he wept. It says he gave way to tears. The grief in front of him reached him. Here is what almost nobody notices in this account. Before any of it happened, when the message came that his friend was dying, Jesus stayed where he was. 2 more days. On purpose. He waited. He arrived late. And then he cried at the grave he could have prevented. And there is one more thing. And it is the part that almost nobody knows is in this account at all. Walking back to that village nearly got him killed. His own men told him so out loud before they left, and after the stone came away and the man walked out, that miracle is the exact thing that made the decision to kill Jesus final. He knew that too. If you are watching this carrying someone you already know you will see again, someone whose name still catches in your throat, this account was written for you, because it answers a question nobody says out loud. If the hope is real, why does it still hurt this much? Before we go in, tell me in the comments where you are watching from tonight. I read every single one. This is the day Jesus cried. Bethany was a small village, less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, close enough to walk, close enough that news traveled fast. 3 people lived in one house there, 2 sisters and a brother, Martha, Mary, and Lazarus. And the account tells us something it does not always tell us about the people Jesus met. It tells us he loved them, not he taught them, not he visited them. It says Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. That family was not a crowd he preached to. It was a house he came back to. So when Lazarus fell sick, the sisters did the most natural thing in the world. They sent word.
Lord, look, the one you have affection for is sick.
Notice what they did not say. They did not say, come. They did not say, hurry. They did not tell him what to do. They just told him. Because when you love someone, and they love someone, you do not need to explain what you are asking for. And this is where the account does something that has bothered readers for 2,000 years. It says, Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. However, when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he actually remained in the place where he was for 2 more days. Read that again slowly. He loved them. However, he stayed. The word sitting between those 2 facts is the hardest word in the sentence. Not, but he was busy. Not, but he was far. Just, he loved them, and he stayed where he was. 2 days. While a man he loved was dying, and 2 women he loved were watching him die. If you have ever prayed for someone and watched nothing happen, if you have ever sat in a hospital room doing the math on how long a message takes to arrive, you already know what those 2 days felt like from inside that house. You know the sound of a door that does not open. And here is what makes it worse, not better. He could have done it from where he stood. Earlier in John's record, he healed a boy without going near him. Distance was never the problem. He did not fail to arrive. He chose not to. The account does not tell us everything that was in his mind during those 2 days. What it does tell us is what he said out loud, that what was about to happen would show something about God that healing quietly from a distance never could. But the sisters did not have that sentence yet. They only had the silence. After those 2 days, he turned to the men with him and said, "Let us go into Judea again." And they pushed back, hard, because Judea was not neutral ground. The last time they were there, it had ended with men picking up stones. Not a metaphor, actual stones in actual hands.
Rabbi, just lately the Judeans were seeking to stone you. And are you going there again?
Read that as what it was. They were not being cowards. They were being accurate. They had been there. They had seen the hands go down to the ground. And Bethany was under 2 miles from Jerusalem. Walking into that village meant walking within sight of the people who wanted him dead. So he told them something that landed sideways.
Lazarus, our friend, has fallen asleep, but I am traveling there to awaken him.
And they were relieved, genuinely relieved. Because if the man was sleeping, then the fever had broken, and the crisis was over, and there was no reason to walk into a town full of people holding rocks. They said so. "Lord, if he is sleeping, he will get well." They had misunderstood him completely, and the account says so plainly, they thought he was talking about ordinary rest. So he told them straight.
Lazarus has died.
Stop on that for a moment because he did not choose that first word by accident. He called it sleep. Not as a journey, not as a promotion, not as someone placed beyond the reach of his voice. Asleep. And then, in the same breath, I am traveling there to awaken him. You do not awaken someone who has moved somewhere better. You wake someone who is still there, still theirs, still able to be called by name and answer. That word is doing a great deal of work in one sentence. And it is the same word used across these accounts over and over for people who died. And it is the reason the resurrection is described as waking up, not as coming back from somewhere far away. If someone you love is dead, that word is not a comfort trick. It is a description of where they are. Asleep, not lost, not somewhere out of reach. Asleep, which is a thing that ends. And then one of them said something that tells you exactly how serious this was. Thomas, the one who gets remembered for doubting, which is not fair to him, Thomas said,
"Let us also go, so that we may die with him."
He was not being dramatic. He was doing the math the same way the others were, and he came out somewhere different. He thought this trip was going to kill all of them. And he said, "Fine. Then we go anyway." That is the mood they walked in with. Not a triumphant procession toward a miracle. A group of men who believed they were walking to their own funerals, following someone who would not explain himself. By the time he finally walked into Bethany, Lazarus had been in the tomb 4 days. 4 days removed every ordinary hope from the scene. Whatever anyone in that village still imagined could happen, this was no recent illness and no brief silence. Lazarus had been in the tomb 4 days. It was over in every way a thing can be over. The house was full of mourners. Bethany was close to Jerusalem, so people had come. The room was loud with the kind of grief that has an audience. And Martha heard he was coming, and she got up and went out to meet him on the road, alone.
Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died.
Sit with that sentence for a second, because it is one of the most honest things anyone says in the entire account. It is not a rebuke. It is not a question. It is grief doing arithmetic out loud. If you had been here, she is not accusing him of anything. She is telling him the one thought that had been running in her head for 4 days. And then she says something else, and this is the part that changes the whole video.
But even now I know that whatever you ask God for, God will give you.
She still believes. After 4 days, after the silence, she still believes. So Jesus tells her, "Your brother will rise." And listen to how she answers. Because Martha is not a woman who needs to be taught the doctrine. She already has it.
I know he will rise in the resurrection on the last day.
She knows. Present tense. Not, I hope. Not, I want to believe. I know. Martha had the future figured out correctly. She had the theology right. She could have taught it to anyone in that room. And she was still destroyed. This is the part that gets missed every time this account is told. We tell it like the lesson is that Martha needed more faith. She did not. She had it. She says it out loud, standing on a road 4 days into the worst week of her life. Knowing the answer did not stop the hurting. If you have ever been told, "He's in a better place," and felt something in you go quiet and hard, you were not lacking faith. You were doing exactly what Martha did, believing the future and still unable to breathe in the present. The account never once corrects her for that. Nobody tells Martha to cheer up. Then Martha went back and called her sister. Mary got up quickly, and the mourners followed her, thinking she was going to the tomb to cry there. She reached him, and she fell at his feet, and she said the exact same sentence her sister had said.
Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died.
Same words, different woman, same 4 days. Martha said it standing up on a road. Mary said it on the ground at his feet in front of a crowd. Grief does not come out of 2 people the same way, but it says the same thing. And here is what the account records next, and every word matters. When Jesus saw her weeping, and the people who came with her weeping, he groaned within himself and became troubled. That is not a calm man observing sadness. The words there are heavy words. Something moved in him that he did not put down. He asked where they had laid him. They said, "Come and see." And then comes the shortest verse in the entire account. 2 words in some languages. In this translation, 5. Jesus gave way to tears. Gave way, not wept as a formality, not a tear of ceremony. He gave way like something holding finally did not hold. And the crowd noticed. They said, "See how much affection he had for him." But some of them said something sharper. "This man opened the eyes of the blind. Could he not have kept this man from dying?" Which is the same question the sisters asked. The same question you have probably asked. It just came out mean that time. So here it is, the question this whole account is built around. He knew. He was minutes away from calling that man out of the ground. He knew the ending. He knew exactly what he was about to do. Why cry? They walked out to the tomb, a cave in a hillside with a stone laid across it. And he said, "Take away the stone." And Martha, the same Martha who knew the doctrine, who said, "I know" on that road, Martha objected.
Lord, by now he must smell, for it has been 4 days.
She was not being faithless. She was being practical. She had buried her brother. She knew what 4 days meant. Believing in a resurrection on the last day is not the same as expecting one on a Tuesday afternoon. They moved the stone, and he called out with a loud voice, not a whisper, not a gesture, a shout into a hole in a rock in front of a crowd of people who had watched him cry 2 minutes earlier. "Lazarus, come out." 2 words and a name. And the man who had been dead came out, hands and feet bound with wrappings, a cloth around his face. Think about what that looked like. Not a spirit, not a vision. A body wrapped, moving, hands still tied, feet still tied, face still covered, coming out of the dark into the afternoon. And the last thing Jesus says in the scene is not a sermon. It is practical, almost domestic.
Free him and let him go.
Untie him. Somebody help him. He cannot get the cloth off his own face. So the man walked out. The sisters got their brother back, and every question in that hillside was answered except one. He still cried, and now we know why that matters. Here is what those tears say, and it is bigger than one funeral in one village. Jesus was not crying because he lacked hope. He was feeling what death does, even while knowing that in a few minutes it would be undone. Which means hope was never supposed to make the hurting stop. We have turned that into a rule somewhere, that if you really believe, you should grieve less. That tears mean the faith is thin, that a Christian who falls apart at a graveside has failed some test. The account destroys that idea in 5 words. The one person in that entire crowd who was completely certain about what would happen next was the one crying. Hope does not cancel grief. It sits down beside it. And there is one more place this shows up. Older. Much older. A man named Job, who had lost more than most people lose in a lifetime, asked the question straight out. If a man dies, can he live again? He answered his own question with something people usually stop reading before they reach. He said, "You will call, and I will answer you." And then he said this, "You will long for the work of your hands. Long for, yearn for. The word carries ache in it. Job was not only saying God is able to bring back the dead. The text says he longs for them. In human language, that is the closest thing we have to saying he misses the work of his hands. The dead are not filed away somewhere out of reach. According to that verse, they are longed for, which puts the tears at that grave in a completely different light. Those were not the tears of someone who did not know better. They were what the longing looks like when it takes a face. So if you are sitting there tonight with a name you cannot say without your voice changing, hear this carefully. Your grief is not a failure of faith. Standing at a grave and falling apart is not the opposite of believing in a resurrection. The one man who was absolutely certain of it did exactly that. And the ache you feel for them, someone else feels it too. That is what Job was trying to say. You are not the only one waiting for that name to be called. There is one more thing in this account, and it is almost never told with the rest of it. Word got back to Jerusalem. A man had been dead 4 days and was walking around Bethany 2 miles from the temple, where anyone could go and look at him. So the leaders called a meeting, and the account records what they said, which is one of the strangest sentences in the whole book. They did not say, "This cannot be true." They did not say, "It was a trick." They said, "If we let him go on this way, they will all put faith in him." They did not speak as if nothing had happened. They spoke as men afraid of what his signs were doing. And from that day on, the account says it plainly, they took counsel to kill him. Not after the temple, not after the trial, from that day. The decision to end his life was made in a room by men who had just heard that a grave in Bethany was empty. Which means the thing he did for one family is the thing that closed the door on him. And go back to the beginning of the account because it is all there. His own men told him before they left, "They were seeking to stone you, and you are going there again." Thomas said out loud, "Let us also go, so that we may die with him." Nobody was confused about the risk, least of all him. The account does not tell us he calculated it that way. What it tells us is the sequence. He knew the danger, he went anyway, he called the man out, and the men who wanted him dead stopped debating and decided. He gave that family their brother back, and the receipt for it came due on him. So when you ask why he cried at that grave, remember he was standing in front of it knowing exactly what walking to it had cost and what calling into it was about to cost. Those were not the tears of a man who did not understand death. They were the tears of the one person there who understood it completely. Lazarus walked out of that tomb, and he lived, and eventually he died again. That is not a sad ending. That was never meant to be the final answer. It was a demonstration. It was one grave opened in front of witnesses, so that everyone standing there, and everyone reading it since, would know what those hands are capable of. And it came with tears, so that nobody would ever think the hope was cold. It cost him the room where they decided. He walked into that village knowing what was waiting on the other side of the stone, and he called the name anyway. Hope does not cancel grief. It sits down beside it. So let me ask you the way I promised at the start. If you are carrying a name tonight, tell me below. Just the name. Nothing else. I read every single one, and there is something about seeing them all in one place. And if this found someone you know is grieving right now, send it to them. They are on your mind for a reason. There is one more detail in the way he called him out of the tomb. He did not begin with a command. He began with a name. Next week I will show you why that name matters.